Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
All right, everybody, welcome to Data Mesh Learning. I'm Nick Heudecker, former industry analyst, currently the head of market strategy and competitive intelligence at Cribl. Cribl is the leading observability pipeline company. And if you want to learn more, you can find out more about Cribl at these links over my head. And the reason I do these videos is because I'm really interested in the data mesh space. And where I sit in the technology space today is completely uncompetitive with data mesh vendors and companies that are in that space. So it gives me a unique opportunity to talk to a lot of different companies. Today, I'm pretty excited about this one, actually. I'm joined by Tom and Jesse from Tag.Bio, or is it Tag.Bio, Tom?
Tag.Bio.
Tag.Bio, all right. And they're coming at the data mesh story from biotech and life sciences, which is a fairly unique view on the space. So Tom, I want to start by throwing it over to you. How did you get here? Was data mesh intentional, or did you kind of discover it as you were implementing your product?
That is an excellent question. So from a very high level perspective, we've been around for a while. Actually, we were essentially formed in 2014, and we had a vision at the time for copying the design pattern of the World Wide Web and translating that into data. Idea that there would be multiple data sources turned into, essentially data servers that can be interoperable and communicable. And we have, explored multiple verticals with this kind of technology that we had. My background is as an engineer, came from Honda Racing, was well-versed in the challenges of trying to extract information from large data sets. Jesse's background is as a bioinformatician and had a very deep understanding of the problems associated with extracting insights from data in the biomedical space. And, we developed this concept, before we knew about the idea of data mesh, with the aim of making it faster and easier to empower domain experts with, information that's locked up in data. And as we developed it, we realized that the life sciences, or healthcare life sciences, but life sciences in particular, we're struggling with, constantly evolving data types, an ever expanding, lake of available data, and problems that, if you could solve them, would save lives. And so from our perspective, it seemed like a very attractive and needed place for concepts like data mesh. At the time, we, termed our technology a dataset hypervisor. Internally we call it the flux capacitor, but it was really when we stumbled across Zhamak's article on data mesh that we realized that the concepts she was promoting were very much aligned with the tech stack that we were developing. And it certainly has helped usher in an era of understanding of the concepts that we were presenting and trying to commercialize in the life sciences space. Jesse, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, Jesse, any thoughts there? I have a question for you as well.
Yeah, so just to add to what Tom said, again, my background is in bioinformatics, aka computational biology. Nowadays, people are calling themselves data scientists to get with the times. And also software development and software architecture. And so one of the concepts we knew from the beginning in 2014 that was important in this space would be to take a decentralized approach to what eventually became termed data products. In that decentralized way, we could deploy for one domain or one department within an organization, a very useful data product, and have another data product deployed to another organization or another department. And those data products could be completely independent. They could be designed. They didn't have to have the same schema. They didn't have to have the same applications. And that, when we read the Zhamak's landmark paper in 2019, lined up very nicely with the tenets of what data mesh has become. It's also worth noting that our data products are not just a domain-driven schema serving up a query engine, but instead it's an application layer. So embedded within each data product is not just data, but also applications on top of that data, which allow anyone who's accessing the data via API or our Python SDK or using a front-end application, they can start to ask questions using the applications driven by that data product. And we see that, that was originally brought in back in 2014. And now I think that helps us stand out in the data mesh space as well.
No, it's interesting. When I think about like life sciences data sets, I think enormous volumes, and I think a lot of regulatory compliance as well. Is that accurate? Is that a reasonable way to think about the space?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. The volume of data and the width of the available data are traditionally problematic, and generating, extracting the information from data sources that are that broad is a significant challenge. Plus, as you mentioned, you've got the regulatory and kind of QC aspects associated with like any insight that you can uncover in data. It needs to be provable. And so there are a lot of governance and regulatory and just kind of technical challenges associated with manipulating data that are that wide.
I would add to that the aspect of exploratory data analysis, being able to ask sort of ad hoc exploratory questions on data, we have known from the beginning that you have to record the provenance of every question that's asked, because you might need to prove it in the future. You might need to have the QC team come in and do exactly what you did that one time. And so our data products, as well as our front-end application, are designed for provenance. So everything you do, every question you ask is stored in history with all of the necessary versioning required. And then that becomes reproducible. And pharma and life sciences cares very much about reproducible data science and exploratory analysis, I think, in comparison to other industries.
Yeah. I think other industries are catching up, but you're absolutely right. Like it hasn't been a priority. It's been very much ad hoc. Every time you take a dive into the data lake, you might get a different result.
Yep.
And it's hard to read that kind of reproducibility. So unpack this for me. What is the Tag.Bio product? Is it a full data mesh offering? How does it work? How would I use it?
Yeah, so I think we are probably a bit unique in the data mesh space at the moment, because we've been developing against a concept that eventually turned into data mesh. So this might be a smidge controversial, but in some ways we're the first company out there with a fully deployable product now that's a full stack data mesh. From data ingestion up through creation of data products, through building of analysis apps and deploying into a analysis portal. It's a comprehensive solution that is currently does not require a bunch of sourcing or building of a data mesh solution, because it is a standalone solution as it is.
I could draw a boundary on that, though.
Yeah.
Our data mesh platform is not a long-term storage source of data. So we are connecting to databases, all sorts of technologies, the emerging technologies, old school technology with regard to relational databases or data lakes. Also in the life sciences space, there's a lot of flat file data sources that we ingest as well. So we're not a long-term storage system. Our data products are deployed on immutable data. If that data updates, then that data product is redeployed. This is very important, again, for provenance and versioning of analysis. And in the life sciences space, you mentioned the volume of data. A lot of that volume of data winnows down through the course of a processing pipeline. So if you sequence someone's genome, their cancer genome, you sequence their normal genome, you end up with a terabyte, 10 terabytes of data potentially. That has to go through a processing pipeline. We refer to that as data manufacturing. There are a number of companies that have been developing technologies in that space for a long time. DNA Nexus, 7Bridges. There's a lot of academic tools out there as well. And we deploy downstream of that. So we tend to deploy downstream of the data processing or data manufacturing pipeline. And our platform does not do that step.
Okay, no, I think that's good to have that boundary on there. So have you approached companies outside of life sciences today that are interested in a data mesh offering?
So we have and what I would say is that what we learned over the history of our company is that data mesh was, a few years ago, it was too out there, too bleeding edge for people to really embrace it. Honestly, Zhamak putting words to, the sentiments within the industry around the shortcomings of data lakes and data warehouses and the need for a new, essentially architecture or paradigm has dramatically improved, our ability to interface with companies, outside of life sciences or others. But I mean, I will say that, our very first customer was actually AS Roma, the Italian soccer club. Now, what we were doing for them was helping them prepare for matches and break down opponents, and it leveraged all of the same kind of capabilities of the data mesh. We just didn't call it that. We have looked at other industries like CPG, finance, ad tech, and the like. We kept getting pulled back to life sciences because they seemed to have the most acute problems when it came to managing their data and ultimately the requirements of, as Jesse mentioned, provenance of analysis, QCable, reproducible analyses. Like these are all things that are, as you mentioned, Nick, other industries are catching up to them, but they were particularly acute within the life sciences and healthcare space. So we have not reapproached those verticals, but we will be in the future.
Just to sort of break it down, our platform, our stack of our code base knows nothing about a gene or a patient or a disease. All of those terms and controlled vocabularies and aspects of a schema are defined at the data product stage using a configuration layer that we have. And so right now our tech could be applied to other industries, right out of the box, I believe.
Yeah. So the life sciences attributes are something that the data product manager would infer, not something that's built into the product itself. Okay,
that's correct.
Got it. So what does it look like? I mean, we're not sharing any content right now, but like, what do I get? Let's say I'm your customer in, Nick Biotech, and I want to start using the Tag.Bio product to generate data products to better support research and development, support, productionizing new drugs, for instance. And I'm just making this up because I've never worked in a biotech company before. What does it look like? What is my experience as a data product manager?
So good question. So, I mean, and we could show a quick kind of overview of what the platform looks like if that would be of interest.
Sure. If you want to join, absolutely.
Yeah. Why don't I just go ahead and share my screen?
Pictures are often worth many words.
Yes.
Right. There we go.
Okay. So this is if I am a end user, so domain expert, somebody who has an interest in analyzing data, but not necessarily the skills necessary or the coding capabilities to extract data, connect to data. So this is what it looks like for an end user. Now for the data product manager or developer, they have a different environment. They typically work in a Jupyter Notebook environment, and it allows them to build data products and deploy analysis apps for end users. As an end user, I click on my big green button. I can see a list of available data products that have been created for my use. And we have, fine-grained controls over who has access to which data products, as well as which analysis apps within a data product. So if I click on this particular data product, I can see a variety of analysis apps that have been deployed against this data that I can run, I can use. any analysis that I run, I get a perfect history of, as Jesse mentioned, the reproducibility is important. And that allows me to go back in time and revisit an analysis, share an analysis, comment on and send to other folks. But it makes for easy collaboration at the end user level, which is, one of the kind of critical features of, if you find something in data, you want to be able to, reference it again, share it with colleagues, and make use of that data. From a developer perspective, it is a coding environment, and you essentially have the ability, using the tools that you're familiar with, like R, Python, Jupyter notebooks, to build and deploy data products within that environment. And the advantage is that, the process of moving from a kind of existing infrastructure to a data mesh infrastructure is relatively easy and familiar. So, they're essentially just, configuring and setting up and deploying a data product in a kind of, in a relatively straightforward manner that then can be used by end users, or essentially the much larger audience of people within an organization who would like to be able to ask sophisticated questions of data without having to, work through a data scientist or bioinformatician to answer each and every question they may have.
I'd like to speak briefly to the less from a domain perspective and more from a research IT perspective, or sort of data ownership perspective. Agility, because we were a small startup a long time ago, bootstrapping for a while, and being able to develop useful data products needed to be very fast for us, so that we could deliver value very quickly to our customers. And so the agility of the platform came right away. So that not only does decentralized data products matter a lot, so you don't have to worry about fixing the previous things while you're deploying the new things, but also if you want to deploy a new data product, all you have to simply do is create the mapping layer, deploy it, and then have one useful app. And as soon as you have one useful app, which can be usually generated within a week, sometimes within the course of one day, that app all of a sudden is starting to deliver value, and you start to get feedback and you start to iterate. So no data product is ever perfect, and there's lots of iteration that we do with our customers, or when customers begin to develop themselves, they do this internally. And then the data products flourish. More apps get developed. The data products mutate. They may split off into other ones. They may access other data products within the mesh. But it's really that agility that's driven by the decentralization of these products, as well as the common API language that they all speak. From a sort of a IT architect perspective, our platform is deployed as a Kubernetes cluster, embedded Kubernetes cluster within customer clouds. So we could offer a SaaS offering in our cloud where people would bring their data to our cloud, but in the healthcare and life sciences space, that's usually a non-starter. So the compliance is critical, and so they want the platform deployed in their cloud. The platform goes through their risk assessment process to be certified as compliant, and then that Kubernetes cluster gets deployed with all of the associated data mesh facilities, the governance layer, the single sign-on layer, and then each data product, this application on top of data, gets deployed as a separate container or multiple containers within that cluster.
That's interesting. I want to touch on the ease of creating a data product. I think ease of creation is a double-edged sword, right? It lets you do things really quickly, but all of a sudden you've got 2 million data products, and you're not sure what's still in use. Have things not been updated? Do I have a legacy view of maybe my customers or current market sentiment or something like that? And this is not specifically a Tag.Bio conversation or question, but more kind of about data mesh in general. Do you think we're going to see the need for a data product undertaker within a data mesh? Some of these things can't live forever.
Right.
Someone's going to have to kind of reclaim them, especially in a container-based environment. I'm just curious what your thoughts are there. What is the life cycle of a data product, and how does it end?
We'll let Jesse start with this one.
Yeah, I think so. Our best customer relationships are about 3 years old. We still see active use in all of the data products that they have built. However, I would say that's not true. There are data products that have reached the end of their life. They are no longer deployed. The images are destroyed. And the only legacy of that data product remains as a Git repository. So every data product is its own Git repository, and all of the ingestion, it's a JSON low code mapping layer for creating the data product. It's a JSON layer for designing an interface for the apps within the data product, as well as R and Python plugins. That's all contained within the Git repository. So that gives us really nice versioning, all of the tools of Git that we have available. And so when something goes into hibernation mode, it is retained as the Git repository, but that doesn't contain any of the data. So it matches compliance, GDPR, HIPAA, GXP from pharma, but it's still there and could be redeployed or revisited in the future.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Being able to control everything within Git. Our product at Cribl, Logstream, does the exact same thing with its configurations. So you can preview everything before you deploy it. I think that model is proving out pretty nicely, I think, using Git as the back end.
And in addition, I'd like to add that the Git also adds really nicely into the CI/CD processes of these deployment frameworks. So you get testing layers at various layers. You can test the data inputs. You can test whether the data quality is still the same as before. You can test whether the apps still work the same way as before. And so when the container gets built from the data product, before it gets deployed, it runs the suite of tests and reports to the developer and the team what the problems might be.
Very cool. So when your customers or your prospects are coming to you, or you're talking to them, what are their pain points, and how are you explaining how Tag.Bio helps?
It varies quite a bit, but fundamentally, I would say if there was one core underlying pain point, it's that they would like to be able to go faster. What they care about is being able to, manipulate data more quickly and make it more accessible to more people, and essentially break the bottleneck that currently exists, where the people asking the questions of data have to work through human intermediaries to help them answer those questions. So whether it's data scientists or bioinformaticians, sophisticated questions typically to date have required very sophisticated practitioners to help them, extract that information. And
even simple ones, sometimes just saying how many patients do I have that have this disease can be a complex query in the data source, and it takes weeks to months for them to get that answer.
So everybody wants to go faster. And what we have found is that data mesh architecture and infrastructure enables them to get answers more quickly.
Interesting. We've seen so much centralization in the data conversation, right? Starting with warehouses and then lakes and Hadoop and things like that. And I think none of those things really reflect context, right? They don't have a lot of empathy for the people that are actually trying to consume the data and use it. The story has always been very much around, well, I want the biggest infrastructure, right? The value conversation has really been kind of left on the table. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I think speed is definitely, especially today, is more essential than ever.
And if we could, the way we describe the problem is solving the last mile. Because all of the infrastructure that is deployed around data management and access, at the end of the day, the question is, are we getting value from that data, and are the right people getting that value? And that to us is the last mile problem. So empowering the people within an organization who can actually make use of the information that's locked up in data, empowering them to have that access and the ability to ask the questions that they want to be able to ask. Making that happen more quickly, that's the last mile. And
also, maybe if I could add, Tom, measuring that. So each data mesh deployment we have at a customer location has an implicit data product, which is sitting on top of the analyses that have been run on all data products within the mesh. And that provides the view into who's using which data products, when have they used them last, which ones are the most important, which apps, all the way down to the app level, which apps are being used the most. And that provides a great deal of transparency and also an ROI validation, which allows us to keep these customers because they can see the data mesh being used.
Yeah.
That's great for you guys, either from an expansion story or from a continued investment story. No, it's fantastic. So tell me about the company. Where are you guys headquartered? Are you bootstrapped? Are you?
Yeah, so we are headquartered in San Francisco. We have been, modestly funded to date. We've got some venture investors. We're actually in the process of going out for our Series A right now. And basically we have been refining the technology and, figuring out the best market vertical to go after first. And, given our provenance, the original concepts for Tag.Bio stemmed from Jesse's work as a bioinformatician and an earlier software tool he developed to enable biologists to be able to, query the results of their own assays. And so we had a life sciences provenance, and we recognized that the platform approach was broadly applicable to multiple verticals. But we've since learning more about the opportunities, have since narrowed down our focus to the specifically life sciences until we get big enough that we can justify going broader. But that is where we're at right now.
We should also mention that life cycle wise, we made a major hire earlier this year where we brought in Sanjay Padi. He came over from AWS. He was the head of research for the public sector there for 5 years before he was at CERN. It's really great having him on the team because he brings in not only a great deal of connections across the industry, but the vision of where the cloud is going. And you can see this right now with cloud adoption. In healthcare, it's still slow, but in life sciences, it's finally mature, I think. And with our platform deploying within a customer's own cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, Sanjay's ad was a big milestone for the company.
Fantastic. Those are all the questions that I have for you guys. Anything else you wanted to add that maybe I didn't touch on?
I mean, just from a high level, like I think from, Zhamak's article was like fairly profound for us because it put a, proper framework and language around the concepts that we were, trying to commercialize. And I think it has brought a lot of recognition to the shortcomings of the existing infrastructure solutions. So I think from our perspective, her, putting words to those thoughts and those feelings has had a fairly profound impact on the way we talk about, our tech stack and also the understanding from the customer perspective. So, I mean, we're very pleased and excited to be a part of, the data mesh community and think that it is the next wave. It is the next generation, and it is critically important at ultimately helping to make data more useful. And so it is, we're very grateful that it is now a known thing that people are excited about and recognize the potential in. And
do you see people like really, is data mesh getting penetration outside of kind of the nerd circle right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So, it's interesting. Some of our customers who weren't familiar with it, we talk about it, we mention it, and they've actually gone off and done, their own research, and they looking at, some of the writings of Zhamak and others in the industry, and they're like, yes, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is what we want. And so it's been, as I mentioned, it's had a profound impact on the ability to explain the concepts and, the value of the concepts, because, as a vendor, you're always discounted a little bit, but when there's there's a sense that the industry is actually moving in a direction, all of a sudden you become much more credible if you are a part of that future.
No, I agree. And I think her work's been fantastic. And you see, similar from other analyst firms and other folks in the industry. This has been fantastic. So if folks want to know more, I mean, clearly from the background you've got, Tag.Bio is one place to go. Where else can people find you if they want to know more?
I mean, Tag.Bio is probably the easiest place to find us. Jesse and I Love talking about all things data mesh, would be happy to engage in further conversations. My email is tom@tag.bio. Jesse is jesse@tag.bio. Please don't hesitate to reach out, because we could nerd out on this stuff for hours.
Listen, guys, thanks a lot. That's all I've got for you today. Hopefully, when you're watching this is useful. Please leave a comment or reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter @Heudecker, and go check out Tag.Bio. All right, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.